My name's Emma, and I'm a psychologist with my own private practice. For years, I poured my heart and soul into my career, helping others navigate their emotional labyrinths. But as I approached my late 30s, I realized something was missing. I wanted a family, someone to share my life with. That's when my friend Sarah stepped in. "Emma, I've got the perfect guy for you," she said over coffee one day. "He's my husband's friend. Why don't you give him a chance?" I hesitated. Blind dates weren't really my thing, but Sarah was persistent. "Come on, Emma. Just add him on social media. What's the harm in that?" Reluctantly, I agreed. That's how I met Tom. He was 39, just a year older than me. Our first interactions were through messages, and I have to admit, I was pleasantly surprised. Tom was intelligent, well-mannered, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: our careers, our dreams, our fears. Weeks passed, and our digital connection grew stronger. Finally, we decided to meet in person. I remember feeling nervous as I waited for him at the cafe. But when Tom walked in, his warm smile put me at ease instantly. That first date turned into a second, then a third. Before I knew it, we'd been dating for several months. Tom was attentive, kind, and seemed to genuinely care about me. But there was something odd: I'd never been to his place. He always came to mine. "Why don't we ever go to your place?" I asked one evening as we cuddled on my couch. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I live with my mom," he admitted. "I don't want to impose on her." I raised an eyebrow. At 39, living with his mother seemed unusual, but I didn't want to judge. "Tell me about her," I encouraged. Tom's eyes lit up. "My mom's amazing. She raised me alone after my dad died when I was 7. I was a sickly kid, had terrible asthma. There were times she literally saved my life." As he spoke, his phone buzzed incessantly. Tom glanced at it, a slight frown crossing his face. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded, putting the phone away. "Just my mom. She worries if I don't respond quickly." I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my gut. As a psychologist, I knew the signs of an unhealthy attachment. But I pushed those thoughts aside. I was determined to approach this relationship as Emma the woman, not Emma the psychologist. One day, about a year into our relationship, Tom finally decided it was time for me to meet her. I remember standing outside their house, my heart pounding with anticipation. The door swung open, revealing a petite woman with Tom's eyes. "You must be Emma," she exclaimed, pulling me into an unexpected hug. "I'm Margaret. I've heard so much about you." The inside of the house was like stepping into a time capsule. Floral wallpaper, doilies on every surface, and an overwhelming scent of lavender. Margaret ushered us into the living room, chattering away. "Tommy, darling, sit here next to me," she patted the spot beside her on the sofa. Tom obliged without hesitation, leaving me to take the armchair across from them. For the next hour, I felt like I was watching a one-woman show, starring Margaret, with Tom as her captive audience. She regaled us with stories of Tom's childhood, each tale punctuated with, "Oh, how I love my boy." I tried to interject, to steer the conversation towards more neutral topics, but Margaret always found a way to bring it back to Tom. It was unsettling. As we were leaving, Margaret pulled Tom into a tight embrace. "Don't stay out too late, sweetheart. You know I worry." Tom nodded obediently. "Of course, Mom. I'll be home soon." In the car, I couldn't help but voice my concerns. "Don't you think your mom is a bit overprotective?" Tom sighed. "She's just caring. You have to understand, Emma. It's been just the two of us for so long. She needs me." I bit my tongue, deciding not to push the issue. But the image of Tom, a grown man, being treated like a child, stuck with me. Months passed, and despite my reservations about Tom's relationship with his mother, our bond grew stronger. Then, on a crisp autumn evening, Tom surprised me with a candlelit dinner at my apartment by getting down on one knee. Of course, I agreed. Tom's face lit up as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It was a beautiful moment, one I'd dreamed of. But as Tom pulled out his phone to share the news with his mother, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. We moved in together in my apartment, and the wedding preparations began in earnest. That's when I started to see the full extent of Margaret's influence on our lives. She called constantly, always with some crisis that required Tom's immediate attention. A leaky faucet, a creaky floorboard, a bout of loneliness, no problem was too small to warrant a call to her son. And Tom ran away to help her every time, leaving me in an empty apartment. As the wedding preparations intensified, so did Margaret's involvement in our lives. She inserted herself into every decision, from the color of the tablecloths to the flavor of the cake. It was as if she was planning her own wedding, not ours. "Mom, don't you think that's a bit much?" Tom asked one day, as Margaret insisted on handwriting all 200 invitations herself. "Nonsense, Tommy," she replied, patting his cheek. "This is my only son's wedding. I want everything to be perfect." I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I decided to have a serious talk with Tom. "Honey, I think we need to set some boundaries with your mother," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Tom's face immediately clouded over. "What do you mean?" "She's just excited about the wedding." I took a deep breath. "I know, but don't you think her involvement is a bit excessive? She calls you multiple times a day, she's making decisions about our wedding without consulting us, and you drop everything whenever she needs you." Tom's eyes flashed with anger. "Are you saying I should abandon my mother?" "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I just think we need to establish some healthy boundaries." We went back and forth for hours. Finally, I suggested what I thought was a reasonable solution. "Why don't we see a couples therapist? They could help us navigate this situation. If not for us, then for the sake of our future together." He softened a bit at that. "Fine. We can think about it, after the wedding. We're too busy right now anyway." I nodded, relieved that he was at least open to the idea. But as the days went by, Margaret's influence only grew stronger. One evening, just a week before the wedding, Tom and I were enjoying a rare moment alone when his phone rang. It was Margaret, of course. "Mom, what's wrong?" Tom's face paled as he listened. "I'll be right there." He hung up and turned to me, his eyes wide with panic. "Mom's in the hospital. Her blood pressure spiked. I have to go." Without thinking, I grabbed my purse. "I'm coming with you." We rushed to the hospital, finding Margaret in a private room. She looked pale, but otherwise fine. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Oh, it's you," she said weakly. "I think it's your fault, Emma. The stress of the wedding, it's too much for me." I stood there, stunned. How could she blame me for this? Margaret dramatically covered her face with her hands and started sobbing. "Tommy, make her leave. I can't bear to look at her right now." Tom turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Emma, could you wait outside? Just for a bit?" I nodded numbly and walked out into the corridor. I sat there for an hour, then two. Tom never came out to check on me. Finally, feeling hurt and angry, I decided to go home. As I sat in our empty apartment, I couldn't help but wonder, was this what my married life would be like? Always coming second to Margaret's needs and whims? When Tom finally came home late that night, I was still awake, my mind racing with doubts and fears. "How's your mother?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "She's fine now," Tom replied, looking exhausted. "She just needed me there until she fell asleep." I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see how manipulative his mother was being. But I held my tongue. We were getting married in a week. Surely, things would get better after that. They had to. The day of our wedding arrived, and I woke up with a mixture of excitement and dread. I wanted to believe that this day would mark a new chapter in our lives, but I couldn't shake off the fear that Margaret would find a way to make it all about her. The ceremony went smoothly, but as soon as we entered the reception, I saw Margaret holding court near the head table. She was wearing a dress that was just a shade too white, and she was regaling guests with stories about Tom's childhood. "And here's my Tommy now," she exclaimed as we approached. "Isn't he handsome? I always knew he'd make such a dashing groom." Tom beamed at his mother's praise, seemingly oblivious to how she was commandeering the attention. Throughout the reception, Margaret made sure she was at the center of everything. She had the DJ play songs she liked, she gave an impromptu speech about her baby boy, and she even tried to cut in during our first dance. "Mind if I steal my son for a moment?" she asked, not really waiting for an answer before pulling Tom away. I stood there, frozen, as I watched my new husband dance with his mother. The guests were whispering, some looking uncomfortable, others amused. Later, as we were cutting the cake, Margaret sidled up to us. "Now, Tommy, remember how I always cut your birthday cakes? Let me show Emma how it's done." Before I could protest, she had taken the knife from my hand and was guiding Tom's hand to cut the cake. I felt like a spectator at my own wedding. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting alone at the head table, watching as Margaret monopolized Tom's time. He kept throwing apologetic glances my way, but he never broke free from his mother's grip. Tom came up to me half an hour later, by which time I had already managed to chat with Sarah and my other friends. "Emma, there you are. Mom wants a family photo. Can you come?" I plastered on a smile and followed him, determined not to cause a scene on our wedding day. But as I stood there, squeezed between Tom and Margaret for the photo, I couldn't help but wonder if this was a glimpse of my future, always trying to find my place in a relationship that seemed to have no room for me. As we left the reception that night, Margaret hugged Tom tightly. "Remember, you're always my little boy," she said, loud enough for me to hear. In the car on the way to our new home, I was quiet. Tom reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for being so understanding today," he said. "I promise, things will be different now. We're starting our own life together." The weeks following our wedding flew by in a blur of thank you notes, gift returns, and settling into our new routine as a married couple. But despite Tom's promises, nothing much changed. Margaret continued to call every day, always with some new crisis that required Tom's immediate attention. I tried to be patient, I really did. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I felt my frustration growing. This wasn't the married life I had envisioned. One evening, after Tom returned from yet another emergency at his mother's house, I decided to broach the subject again. "Tom, I think it's time we seriously consider seeing that therapist," I said gently. "I really think a professional could help us navigate this situation." "Fine," Tom conceded. "We'll look into it after our vacation." "I promise." "Ah yes, our vacation." With everything going on, we hadn't had a chance to go on our honeymoon yet. But I had some time off coming up, and I was determined to make the most of it. "Speaking of which," I said, changing the subject. "I was thinking we could go somewhere tropical. Just the two of us. No phones, no interruptions. What do you say?" Tom's face lit up. "That sounds perfect. I'll take care of all the arrangements." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this trip was exactly what we needed to reconnect and start our married life properly. The day of our departure arrived, and I was buzzing with excitement. As we entered the airport, Tom handed me my boarding pass. "Here you go," he said. "I'm just going to check in separately. I'll meet you at the gate." I thought it was odd, but I was too excited to dwell on it. It wasn't until I reached the check-in counter that I realized something was wrong. "Mrs. Walker, you're checked in for economy class," the attendant informed me. Confused, I made my way to where Tom was waiting. "There must be some mistake," I said. "My ticket is for economy, but yours?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Oh, yeah, I used some credit card points to upgrade my seat to first class." There were only enough points for one upgrade, and I thought, well, I'm taller, so I could use the extra legroom. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Well, can I at least wait with you in the first-class lounge before we board? Tom shook his head. Sorry, it's for first-class passengers only. But don't worry, I'll see you on the other side. Before I could protest further, he hurried off towards the first-class lounge, leaving me standing alone in the busy terminal. I made my way to the economy class lounge, my mind reeling from Tom's strange behavior. As I settled into an uncomfortable plastic chair, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced around the crowded area, and that's when I saw her, a familiar figure with perfectly coiffed gray hair. It can't be, I muttered to myself. But the more I stared, the more certain I became. It was Margaret. My heart racing, I made a split-second decision. I approached the information desk and, with a forced smile, asked about purchasing access to the first-class lounge. The attendant looked surprised but processed my payment without question. As I entered the plush first-class lounge, my eyes scanned the room. There, in a secluded corner, sat Tom and Margaret, heads close together, sipping coffee and laughing quietly. I strode over, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. What the hell is going on here? Tom's head snapped up, his face draining of color. Emma! What are you? How did you get in here? Margaret, on the other hand, looked completely unfazed. Oh, hello dear. Fancy seeing you here. Tom and I were just discussing our upcoming trip. Your trip? I echoed, my voice rising. This was supposed to be our honeymoon. Tom stood up, holding his hands out placatingly. Emma, please, let's not do this here. I can explain everything after we land. But I was beyond listening. Explain what? How you lied to me. How you're taking your mother on our honeymoon instead of your wife. By now, the entire lounge had fallen silent, all eyes on our little drama. Tom's face reddened. It's not like that. I had enough points for 2 first-class tickets. I just thought. You thought what? I spat. That your mother deserved it more than your wife? Margaret piped up, her voice sickeningly sweet. Emma, there's no need to make a scene. Tom and I have always vacationed together. You understand, don't you? I turned to her, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. No, I don't understand. I don't understand how you can be so selfish, so manipulative. And you, I rounded on Tom, I don't understand how you can let her control you like this. She's your mother, not your wife. Tom reached for me. Emma, please, you need to calm down. We can work this out on the vacation. We'll have plenty of time to talk and get closer. His words hit me like a slap in the face. Get closer? With his mother there? In that moment, everything became crystal clear. No, I said, my voice suddenly calm. We won't. Because I'm not going anywhere with you. This marriage is over, I want a divorce. Margaret's face lit up with a triumphant smile. She looped her arm through Tom's. Well, if that's how you feel, dear. Come on, Tommy, we don't want to miss our flight. Tom looked torn, his gaze darting between Margaret and me. But in the end, he let his mother lead him away towards the boarding gate. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of what had just happened washed over me. The other passengers in the lounge were still staring, some with pity, others with poorly concealed interest in the scene they'd just witnessed. Suddenly, I couldn't bear to be there a second longer. I turned on my heel and practically ran out of the lounge, out of the airport, not stopping until I reached the taxi stand outside. The taxi ride home was a blur. I stumbled into my apartment, the silence hitting me like a physical force. For a moment, I just stood there, letting the reality of my situation sink in. Then, something inside me snapped into action. I moved through the rooms with purpose, gathering Tom's belongings. Clothes, books, his ridiculous collection of superhero figurines, all of it went into boxes. It was cathartic, in a way, dismantling the life we'd built together. Hello, I need to arrange for some items to be moved to a storage unit, I said when I called the courier service. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, stronger, more decisive than I'd felt in months. With Tom's things out of the apartment, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I want to file for divorce, I said, the words coming out easier than I'd expected. The following days passed in a whirlwind of paperwork and phone calls. I also redecorated the apartment, erasing the last traces of Tom's presence. I caught up on reading, took long baths, and rediscovered the joy of cooking for one. One evening, as I was curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and a good book, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tom. Emma, please, can we talk? I made a mistake, I miss you. I stared at the message for a long time, memories of our life together flashing through my mind. But then I remembered the airport, the look on his face as he'd let Margaret lead him away. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I typed my response. Your things are in storage unit number 247 at City Storage. I've sent the divorce papers to your mother's address. Please sign them and return them to my lawyer. I hit send and blocked his number. The next day, I called Sarah, the friend who'd introduced me to Tom. Emma, oh my God, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Sarah's voice was thick with remorse. Can I make it up to you? Dinner, maybe? That evening, Sarah and I met at our favorite restaurant. As we clinked our wine glasses together, Sarah looked at me anxiously. How are you really doing, Emma? I took a moment to consider the question. You know what? I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I feel free. Sarah's face broke into a relieved smile. To freedom, then, she said, raising her glass. To freedom, I echoed. The divorce proceedings went quickly. Tom didn't contest anything, and we had no shared assets to divide. As I signed the final papers, I felt a chapter of my life closing. But rather than sadness, I felt a sense of anticipation. After my vacation, I dove back into work with renewed energy and purpose. My recent experiences, though painful, had given me a unique perspective on codependent relationships, particularly between parents and children. I channeled this insight into a series of psychological papers, carefully avoiding any specific mentions of Tom or Margaret. The papers resonated within the psychological community, and before I knew it, I was invited to present my findings at the annual Conference of Family Psychology in Boston. Standing at the podium, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had transformed my personal struggles into something that could help others. It was at this conference that I met Dr. James Anderson. He approached me after my presentation, his eyes alight with professional interest. Dr. Walker, your insights on codependency are fascinating, he said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Anderson. I specialize in family therapy. We ended up talking for hours, sharing experiences and theoretical approaches. James was a few years older than me, with a warmth that immediately put me at ease. He mentioned he had a 10-year-old son from his previous marriage. As the conference drew to a close, we exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. Over the next few weeks, our professional discussions evolved into something more personal. Before I knew it, we were dating. Being with James was like a breath of fresh air. Our relationship was built on mutual respect, shared interests, and healthy communication. There were no dramatic phone calls, no guilt trips, no sense that I was competing for his attention. A few months into our relationship, I met James's son, Ethan. I was nervous at first, but Ethan's openness and enthusiasm quickly put me at ease. He was a bright kid with a passion for superheroes and a knack for math. Emma, did you know that Thor's hammer weighs as much as a neutron star? Ethan asked one day as I was helping him with his homework. I laughed, delighted by his mixture of scientific knowledge and pop culture enthusiasm. I didn't know that, Ethan. Tell me more. As Ethan launched into an excited explanation about the physics of superhero weapons, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. This was what a healthy family dynamic felt like. It was around this time that I got a call from Sarah. "Emma, I ran into Tom's cousin yesterday," she said, her voice hesitant. "I thought you should know. Tom is still living with Margaret. Apparently, they're closer than ever." I was surprised to find that the news didn't affect me the way I thought it would. There was no pain, no anger, not even disappointment. Just a calm acceptance. "Thanks for telling me, Sarah," I replied. "But you know what? That's Tom's choice. Everyone chooses their own path in life." As I joined James and Ethan at the game table, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. I had found a partner who respected me, a child who brought joy into my life, and a career that allowed me to help others navigate the complex world of relationships.